Hello everyone. Welcome back to chapter 3.4 additional form widgets. Now that we have explored the most common form widgets like text boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, and buttons, we will move on to some additional form widgets that extend the functionality. These widgets provide some more specialized way for users to input data. In this section, we will introduce you to these additional widgets, showing how they are created in HTML and how they enhance the overall user experience. To start with, a picker is a type of input widget that lets the user interactively choose a value using through a pop-up or guided selection tool. One of the most common examples is the date picker. Instead of manually typing a date, a user can select one directly from a calendar pop-up. This makes it easier to avoid mistakes in formatting or invalid entries. The syntax for creating a date picker is very straightforward. We use the input type equal to date element. Additionally, we can set boundaries by using attribute like mean to define the earliest date allowed and max to define the latest date permitted. This ensures that the users can only select valid dates within the range we specify. Alongside the date pickers, another useful type of picker is the color picker. When a user clicks on a color picker input, a color selection pop-up opens up, allowing them to visually explore and choose a color. This is especially helpful in applications where users need to pick colors for themes, designs, or graphics without having to know specific color codes. The syntax for creating a color picker is just simple. We use input type equal to color. The browser then automatically provides a color selection tool like the color wheel shown here, making it easy for the users to choose from million of possible colors. The number input is a special form widget that ensures the user enters only valid numerical values, like a regular text box, which allows any kind of text, like the number input restricts the input to numbers and even provide controls for incrementing or decrementing values. The basic syntax is input type equal to number. This element can also use the min and max attributes to define the range of acceptable values. For example, if you set min equal to 0 and max equal to 212, the user must enter a number within that range. If the user enters a value outside the specified range, as shown in the example here, the browser automatically validates the input and display an error message such as value must be less than or equal to 212. This makes number input very useful for forms that collect quantities, ages, or measurements where only numerical value makes sense. The range input is a special form widget that allows user to select a value by dragging a sliding control along a line. Unlike typing directly into a text box, this widget gives a more interactive way to choose values within a specific range. The basic syntax is input type equal to range. This element can also use the attributes mean, max, and value to define the smallest acceptable value, the largest acceptable value, and the starting value shown on the slider. In the example shown here, the slider is displayed along with a label instructing the user to select a value using the slider. When the user drags the control, the browser automatically adjusts the input value, keeping it within the defined minimum and maximum range. This makes range input particularly useful for forms where users need to select values like volume levels, brightness, or price ranges, offering a smoother and more visual interaction than typing numbers manually. Now let's talk about the combo box, which is a special kind of form widget. A combo box combines a text box and a drop-down menu in a single widget. This gives user two options. They can either type directly into the box or select from a predefined list of choices. The combo box is created using input element along with a data list element. Here the input provides the text box where the users can type, and the data list provides the list of options that the user can choose from. Together, they create a flexible widget. Looking at the example on the slide, notice that as the user types something like ball, the combo box automatically filters and suggests making items such as baseball, basketball, and football. This makes the input faster and helps prevent errors since the user doesn't have to type the whole value themselves. So, in real world usage, combo boxes are very useful when you want to offer suggestions but still allow the user freedom to type their own input. Think of search bars, autofill fields, or form fields where you want both guidance but flexibility. So the key takeaway is a combo box is a hybrid widget. It guides the user with suggestions but doesn't restrict them only to predefined options. Then there is specialized text inputs. These are input types that are tailored for entering very specific kind of text. Instead of just using a plain text box for everything, HTML file introduced input types that tell the browser what kind of data is expected. There are four important ones here. The URL, used when the user needs to type a web address. Tell, used for entering a phone number. Email, designed for entering a valid email address. Search, meant for search terms like the ones you enter in a search bar. What's really interesting is how mobile browser respond to these input types on a phone. Um, if you use type equal to tell, the browser automatically displays a number keypad, making it much easier to type a phone number. Similarly, when the input type is email, the keyboard includes a handy key like at the rate and .com. So users don't have to hunt for them. On the slide, you can see this in action. The phone number field brings up a numeric keypad, while the email feed brings up a keyboard optimized for typing email addresses. So the key point is specializing text inputs improve usability and accuracy by making the input process easier and by reducing errors, especially on mobile devices. Form validation is all about making sure that users cannot submit incorrect or incomplete data. Instead of waiting until the server checks and rejects the input, the browser itself can enforce certain rules immediately. This makes the form more reliable and improves the user's experience. For example, attributes like max length and mean length controls how many characters a user can type into a field, which is useful for something like a password that must be between a certain length. There's also the pattern attribute, which uses something called a regular expression to enforce very specific rules, such as requiring a sequence of letters and numbers in a particular format. The required attribute simply ensures that a field cannot be left blank, which is essential for input like email or phone number fields. And finally, the step attribute controls how values increase or decrease. For instance, allowing only multiple of 5 in a numbers field. What makes all of these attributes powerful is that the browser handles the validation automatically. If a user enters something invalid, the form won't submit and the browser gives them feedback right away. This means developers can prevent many common errors without writing any additional code. So, not every browser supports all the latest HTML widget and attributes, and this can sometimes break the functionality of a web page. To handle this, developers use something called a fallback. A fallback is simply a backup plan to make sure that even if a browser doesn't support a certain feature, the web page still worked properly. For example, if a particular input widget isn't recognized, you can provide a simpler alternative that the browser will use instead. A more advanced kind of fallback is called a polyfill. A polyfill is written in JavaScript and mimic the missing feature so that users on older browser can still interact with the page as intended. Take the date picker for example. Not every browser had native support for it at first, but with the polyfill, developers could simulate the date picker to the user experience, so the user experience stayed consistent. To manage this more efficiently, developers often rely on libraries like Modernizer. Modernizer scans the browser to see which features are supported and which are not. Based on that information, it can automatically load the right polyfills to fill the gaps. This approach ensures that no matter what browser a user has, the core functionality of the web page remains the same. Now let's talk about what happens when a browser doesn't support a certain widget. For example, here we have the date input element. In modern browsers, this normally brings up a calendar picker so users can easily choose a date. But if the browser doesn't support it, it won't break your form. Instead, the browser simply treats the input as a regular text field. That means the user can still type something in, but they won't get the convenient calendar pop-up. This example shows exactly that the input type equal to date looks like an ordinary text box when the feature isn't supported. This is why we discussed fallbacks and polyfills earlier. They ensure that even in these cases, users still have a reliable way to enter a valid data. Earlier, we saw that when a browser doesn't support the date input element, it simply falls back to a plain text box. That's where a polyfill comes into play. A polyfill is a piece of JavaScript code that makes new HTML features work even in browsers that don't natively support them. In this example, we are using Modernizer to first detect whether the browser supports the date input type. If it doesn't, the script then loads a jQuery date picker as a substitute. This way, the user still gets a functional date selection tool even if their browser doesn't support or have a built-in. Notice how the highlighted lines in the code show the external files being loaded. Modernizer for detection and jQuery plus the date picker library for the actual functionality. Together, they ensure that no matter what browser the user has, the form behaves consistently. So, the big takeaway is polyfills act like backup plans. They fill in the gaps when a browser falls short. So in this section, um, um, we have learned about additional widgets and different functionalities of HTML widgets and forms, and how they enhance the overall user experience. And I will see you in the next one.